So we're here with President of the Melbourne Chess Club and FIDE Master Grant Szuveges. How are you doing, Grant?
Yeah, good, Paul.
It's good. Today I thought we would take the opportunity to ask Grant about his experience in chess and specifically related to juniors and how they can improve and get to the level where they're ready to play tournament games. So first of all, tell us a bit about your development and when you started to get interested in chess and how you improved a little bit.
Oh gosh, it was so long ago. I suppose I started playing competitively around age 15, I suppose, give and take a little bit. My sister actually played, even though she's younger than me, she kind of played before me. So I kind of took it up, I suppose, after she did, in a way. Yeah, I started playing roughly 15. When I started playing, I mean started playing tournaments. I knew the rules from about the age of 4 or 5 years, I think 5 years old, my dad taught me. So from age 15, started playing tournaments. I suppose started off slowly like anyone, or like most people do. I think by the time I was maybe 18, or I think I was about 1500, and then by the time I was 20, probably sort of jumped up to about 1800 or so. But then sort of when I was sort of 20 to 21, I took a really big leap, and then by 1999, when I suppose I was 22 or 23, I can't recall. Yeah, I sort of made a very big jump, and got my FIDE Master title. I probably wasn't 2300 strength, probably 2200 strength. Yeah, and so took that sort of big leap in those last few years, and then I just didn't play for another 10 years after that. So
great.
Yeah.
So it's quite different, I guess, starting at age 15 to starting aged 6 or 7, where a lot of kids are starting now. So how did you approach the game at 15? Were you using books to study? Were you playing a lot of Blitz? Going into the club? How did you do it?
Look, no doubt it's a very different kettle of fish when you start at 15, because you kind of, and particularly then in a different era. When you start as a little kid, you've got nothing to lose. You're kind of 5 years old, 6 years old, and if you get to 1500, say after 2 years or 3 years, you're everyone's going on about how good you are. Whereas if we start at 15, you still get to 1500 after 2 or 3 years. It doesn't really seem as big a deal because you're not a little kid. I think the physical size of a little kid has a big impact on how people see it. You know, a little kid is 1500 or 2000 or whatever. It really does look very good. Whereas if a 15-year-old kid or an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old has improved at the same rate, it just doesn't look as impressive. So you could actually be improving quicker than some kids, but you're not being given credit for that. Now, the flow-on effect for that is you're not actually being given enough credit from the chess scene itself, and that's not to I'm not saying that to discredit the actual chess scene or the ACF or the VCA back then, what was CV, or even clubs or whatever. It's just, I suppose, the nature of the beast. There tends to be more encouragement for young kids who achieve something very early on. And I suppose the reason for that is because when you're kind of between, say, 15 and 20, you're sort of doing other things. You know, you're kind of finishing high school, you're working or you're studying, you know, you're interested in girls, you're interested in other interests, you know, you're doing a lot more. Whereas when you're a little kid, you kind of, if you're into chess, and you pretty much don't have to worry about earning a living or feeding yourself. You know, the mum and dad will do all that for you. You know, they'll buy all your chess books, they'll pay for this, that and the other. Whereas as an adolescent or a teenager or a young adult, you know, you've got the reality of the real world to deal with. So yeah, that's probably one of the bigger I suppose questions. What was your other question?
My original question was, so I guess what advantages or disadvantages does a 6 or 7 year old kid taking up chess have compared to a 15-year-old kid? on the positive and negative, and how should they study differently?
Okay. I suppose I've spoken a bit more about the disadvantages for the older kid. There's definitely some advantages though. I suppose the main one being that you're more independent. You've got more, I suppose, more time to study or more opportunity to study, and you don't have to rely on mum or dad giving you a lift anywhere. You don't have to rely on mum or dad doing as much for you. You know, you can go to a tournament by yourself, stay with your mates or whatever. You know, you can go over to Adelaide and, you know, you can even stay in backpackers or whatever, or stay with friends and play in a tournament. You don't have to wait for your mum and dad to come along with you and that sort of stuff. So you get to play more, I'd say. I think that's probably one of the bigger things. But and you can go into the club, you know, catch the tram or whatever. You know, you don't have to wait for the lift from the parents. You can come home later. You can play more. I suppose more exposure to adult chess as such. I suppose as for the difference in studying, I guess life teaches you a bit. You're probably a little bit wiser when you're 15 or 16, although, you know, a lot of 15, 16-year-olds think they know everything, so maybe in a sense it's a bit of a curse, but I think as you get older you sort of learn to read people a bit more. You learn to read the world, you start developing your own views, your own opinions on things. I guess when you have a little kid and a 1400 player tells them, oh, play this is good, such and such is good, they're going to believe it. It could be just a total load of rubbish. I was actually coaching a few people in, I suppose, a recent past, and I asked, and they've said, oh, my old coach told me this, and I'm like, well, who's your old coach? And they've said a 1200, 1300 type player, and I've said, look, trust me, this is just junk. It's not true. And, you know, so I suppose they don't, you know, when you're a little kid, you'll take everything any adult says as gospel, even if the adult's not necessarily a good chess player. Now, let me clarify that. I think 1400 is a good chess player. You know, they're better than 99% of people in the world at chess, easily. But, I mean, they're not the level of a 2000 player, for example. And nevertheless, as an adolescent, you're probably going to question what a player says more. You know, you're going to argue a bit with your coach. You're going to question them. You're going to say, all right, well, you think this would prove it. What about this move? What about that move? Whereas a little kid will probably just blindly believe a lot of it. And again, it depends on the individual. There's some little kids who will really be very plucky about that sort of thing, and some will be very quiet. So it all depends on the individual. Yeah, it's such a hard question to answer generally. It's with generalisations, especially not without offending anyone.
Okay, so getting back to the younger kids, how competitive should they be at 7 or 8 or 10 or 12 years old? Is there something that should be really, you know, furious or upset or crying if they're losing games? Or is it more something they should try to keep passionate about?
Look, it's an interesting question because, you know, I'm a competitive person myself, and I love to see that sort of stuff in people. But, you know, there's nothing better than, you know, in this respect than a kid who absolutely hates losing. You know, that's the sign of a good player. We've got international master James Morris. One of my favourite memories of James, and I tell James this regularly, is when he was a little kid, and he hated losing. I've never seen a little kid who hated losing, particularly if he blundered a winning position. He just hated it, and he'd cry and he'd get angry and all this. And in a way, I thought to myself, this kid's going to be a very, very good player. Because you just have to have that. I mean, it's when you're playing a competitive sport of any sort, well, it's about winning. You know, it's about competing. You know, do you want to be a player who just, oh, I lost? You know, you want to be competitive, and you know that's probably not very politically correct of me to say so, but I think if it is a competitive sport, then you want to do well at it. But on the other hand too, you know, none of us got into chess because we wanted to beat everyone. We all got into chess because it's fun. And I suppose there needs to be some sort of balance. You don't want it to be too competitive to the point where it's ugly. You know, if you've got a whole tournament full of people cracking it and getting upset and throwing pieces and just having tantrums. You don't want that either. So you sort of have to have a bit of a balance. You don't want what you really don't want to see, and unfortunately, I've seen this way too many times. Is I suppose ugly parents, for lack of a better word, berating their kids because their kids lost or didn't try hard enough or whatever. I think that's just a really bad look. The kid, I guess it's up to the kid. The kid has to, if the kid wants to do it for fun, well, the parent should support that. If the kid wants to do it to be ultra competitive and try to win and try to achieve something big very early on, well, then they should take it more seriously. But what you don't want to see is the kid there doing it because a parent wants them to be there. Like, you want to see the kid there because they want to be there, whether that be for fun or whether that be to compete. I think that's really the most important thing with that. I do believe, and I do believe this even for competitive people, when there is no fun in it, you shouldn't be playing. If it's not fun, what are you doing there? You need to go and do something that's fun. You don't waste your life on doing something you don't enjoy doing.
Yep.
And I think that's a very important point.
Okay, I coach a couple of kids, and their parents want them to improve very quickly, and they think of chess as this great intellectual muscle builder. And I don't know, sometimes it's difficult to explain how much patience you need and how difficult it is, I guess, for a kid to understand strategic ideas. Do you have any general comments or advice for parents of young chess players?
Yeah. Look, be patient. One thing with, I think a big, I suppose a criticism I could say, and then I don't mean to say that in a negative way, but I think a criticism of parents of chess players is they have very unrealistic expectations. A lot of them don't play the game themselves. And so it's impossible for them to understand the game, and it's impossible for them to respect the game as well. And I say that very seriously. You cannot respect something you don't know how to do. And that's not to say that they are disrespectful of chess. It's to say that they don't understand how hard chess is. Chess is an incredibly hard game. You get people who've played chess all their life who end up 1300 at their best. You get countless people who don't go on to become very, very strong players because chess is very, very hard. And I mean, the reality is that you become 1200, you're still a good player. But you sort of, when you compare that to 2000 or 1800 or whatever, well, then it's not so good. But I mean, you're still a very good player if you get to that level. I think parents kind of think it's going to be a lot easier than it actually is, but what they don't see with the good players is how much hard work they've put in over the 10 or 20 or 40 years that they've been playing. It takes a lot of work. You've got to put in a lot of hours away from the board of study, and then when you get to the board, you've got to just lift that intensity and work really hard at the board every move of every game. I say to my students, actually, and I'll say it here, you should feel exhausted after a tournament game of chess. If you don't feel exhausted, then one of two things has happened. One, you've won the game too easily. And secondly, you haven't worked hard enough. You should feel absolutely exhausted after a game. That's how hard you should work. If you're not prepared to work that hard, do something else. You won't become good at chess if you're not prepared to do that. As for kids improving, you're not going to be improve. You're not going to turn from a 1,000 player to a 2,000 player in a year. It's impossible. You improve in peaks and troughs. You learn things and you drop back a bit, and then you sort of take a while to actually, for the things you've been taught to sink in. You've got to practice them too. It's a sort of game, you can't learn chess by just learning chess by going to classes or going to coaching or whatever. You have to play. Your practical play is so important. It's such a big part of it. I think that's a really, really important thing. I would say to parents, if you want your kids to improve, get them to play as much as possible. That's probably the main thing, but also working hard at the board. Very important points.
So what about yourself? Peaks and troughs. Tell us about how long it took you to get to 2200 and setbacks and.
Again, it's a long time ago. I suppose I sort of got to a reasonable level, sort of 1600, 1700-ish level. But I got there sort of reasonably easily, I suppose, for comparatively. Then sort of sat there for a while, maybe a year at that sort of level. Again, it's so long ago I can't remember. I mean, I was always able to beat players and draw with players who were stronger than me, but sort of drop points against players weaker than me as well. So sort of sitting in between that sort of 16 and 1800 mark for a while, for about a year, and then I started getting more coaching from Daryl Johansson, and the thing that he said to me, I suppose it had the most impact of all, is he said you need to work really hard at the board. And so I made the commitment to just work hard at the board, to not get up from the board when it wasn't my move, to think in my opponent's thinking time, to really just sit there and calculate various, sit like this, just analysing intensely, looking at everything and really analysing everything. And that's when I really improved. I think I went from sort of that sort of 16, 1800 type player to maybe 2100 pretty quickly. I don't know if it was 1 year or 2 years or whatever it was, but you just sort of felt the strength coming. You know when you've when you've turned a corner. You just feel stronger. You sort of see players in a different light. You see players who you saw before as rather, when you're 16, 1700, there's certain players you'll see as, all right, a draw against this guy's not that bad. I'd like to beat them, but, if it's a draw, so be it. Whereas when you sort of feel stronger, it's like, nah, you just have to beat that player. It's just it's a job. It's become a job to do. Your job is to beat that player. And you do it most of the time because you're that level.
Okay.
I suppose.
Cool. Let's move on to some more specific examples of ways people can improve. I know that the advice that I've heard repeated to me thousands of times is if you want to improve, you study master games. Study Grandmaster games, look through the ideas, find 100 games in the same opening that Grandmasters have played, and study the wins, study the losses, study the draws, and try to work it all out. But I guess for kids, it's okay if you're at 1500 level already, but if you give a kid 12 or 13 years old a game between Kasparov and Fischer, they never played, Kasparov and Karpov, they're not going to understand any of it, are they? So
I've got a very set opinion on this, and I absolutely firmly believe this. I'll start out when we discuss Grandmaster games. Yes, looking at Grandmaster games are good. Of course they are. But I have a big issue with something that, not so much the idea of looking at Grandmaster games, but something that never seems to get done, which has really helped me. I used to look at a lot of games between a strong player and a weak player. So, for example, I'd look at old tournament bulletins and you'd look at the first few rounds, Ian Rogers versus a 1600, or Daryl Johansson versus a 1600, Alex Wohl versus a 1600. I really liked looking at those because you get to see how a good player dismantles a weak player. The big problem with looking at Kasparov versus Shirov, or Kramnik versus whoever else, Anand or whatever, you're seeing games which are very high quality. You're seeing very high quality moves all the time for every move. And now that's good. It's good for your chess. Obviously it is. It couldn't not be. But what you're not doing is learning how to beat bad moves. You have to learn how to beat bad moves as well. For example, you could play the 3 or 4 or 5 moves into some opening, or 10 moves, for example, and your opponent plays a second-rate move which just looks wrong. It doesn't lose a piece, but it's just wrong. You need to know how to exploit that. You need to know how to beat that sort of stuff. What you often see with weak players is they'll play someone who plays a very dodgy looking move against them, but they just don't know how to beat the move or how to beat that strategy, and then they end up losing to the strategy even though it's a flawed strategy, they lose to it because they just don't know how to beat it. And you sort of have to know how to beat bad moves as well as how to play against good moves. I think this is a really, really important point. And the other point, if you're 1200, you can still learn from looking at a 1700 players' games, albeit not as much, and you may learn some bad habits even, but still better than where you're at. I think Grandmaster games are very important to look at, but not. I think you do have to mix it up a bit and look at how good players beat weak players. Very, very important. I can't believe more people don't say this. I know there was another part to that question. What was it? It was about children.
So, I guess kids can't understand Kasparov v Karpov.
Can I butt in here?
Yes.
One player who I really think is not easy to learn from is Kasparov.
Mm-hmm.
His games are simply too complicated.
Mm.
The players who are easy to learn from are the Grandmasters of the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Botvinnik, Tal, Petrosian, Fischer, Portish, give me some more examples, Averbach, Smyslov, Reshevsky, Kerez. These guys, they're very much the golden era of positional chess. Things that, something like a strong knight outpost is just as strong now in 2013 as it was in 1914, 100 years ago. In Capablanca's day, a strong knight versus a bad bishop. It was no weaker then than it is now, and it's no better then than it is now. It's always going to be strong, it's always going to be there, it's always going to be a massive part of chess.
Right, and you think that today's games between Grandmasters rely more on computer preparation and variations that have been studied by, silicon machines for hours and hours?
Yeah, I do. I also think, though, that I suppose the top-level Grandmasters of these days, they know about things like strong knights and bad bishops, of course they do. But I suppose their games are so high in quality now that they're not going to make that sort of positional mistake and give themselves a bad bishop. Whereas in the 50s and 60s a player would. Nowadays it's just become it's almost like all of them are too good at chess.
Mm.
And now it's simply a case of who can out-calculate each other. Yep. Or who can out-prepare each other down variations. Again, that's why it's sort of good to look at a strong player versus a weak player, because a weak player will make a mistake. Whereas 2700s, you're not going to see too many bad moves.
Mm.
And even the bad moves you see are going to be, probably a different sort of bad move to what you'll see from a 1600 player, for argument's sake.
Yeah.
So I think that if you want to learn the players from the 1940s through to the 70s or 80s, the golden age. Although you could almost say that these days these guys are kind of learn the classics. These have become the classics now. And of course, the players like Capablanca, Alekhine, the sort of older version of the classics are so important as well. I think players who I've met a number of players over the years who are kind of so obsessed with learning about the modern game that they've got no idea about the old school stuff, and they kind of become like a house without any foundations. They learn the Trompovsky or the bayonet attack of the King's Indian and all this modern stuff, but they don't understand the principles it's all based on, and they never really get far because they just haven't put in the work to understand where all this came from. It's like an example would be learning about why the First World War started, because the Franz Ferdinand got shot, and then Serbia declared war on whoever they declared war on, Austria. Well, was it the other way around? The point is, though, that you're looking at events, whereas looking at why these events happened, what was the dynamic between Serbia and Austria beforehand? What was the dynamic across Europe with Germany, Britain, France, etc.? Looking at why this happened, looking at the foundations, it's exactly the same in chess. Why is it that we analyse the Nadov for 25 moves and we just all accept that these 25 moves are the best 25 moves? It's the reason is because these moves have evolved from over the last 100 years, and we need to know what it's all come from. And that will build a very good base for your chess and a very good understanding for your chess over a long period of time. So learning the classics is so important. Agreed. And you can really tell a player who hasn't learnt them. You can pick them a mile away, and they're often very easy to beat.
Mm-hmm. Do you think players of your generation have, generally speaking, like a wider understanding of the background of chess?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was playing a young up and comer from Melbourne Chess Club, maybe a month ago. And this kid's quite a good player. He's beaten some good players, but I was playing a Blitz game with him, and I was, to be frank, I was crushing him most games, but I wasn't crushing him on calculation. I was just simply building positions, and what I sort of noticed about this guy was he was becoming unstuck. The more I suppose the less calculation the position had, the more unstuck he would become, and at some point he just seemed stuck for a plan. And I said, "You don't really know the plan, do you?" And he said, "No, not really." And I go, "All right, well, in this position, swap your worst piece for mine. So which is your better bishop?" And he points to the bad bishop, and he said, "That's a good one." I go, "Are you kidding?" And he really didn't know which was the good bishop. And this is a kid who's kind of 16, 17, 1800. And, whereas in my day, a 1700 player would absolutely know what is a good bishop and what's a bad bishop. So I think this generation is really... there are some definite holes in their knowledge.
Right. What's funny about that is I know the kid that you're talking about, and he actually beat a veteran international master at the club a couple of months ago. So what's kind of funny is that he knew enough opening theory to catch Szuveges in a trap in the French defense, but at the same time kind of struggled just on simple things.
Yeah, and this is where it seems to be going these days. You can get players who are kind of... it's almost like it's all becoming about calculation and the database and the opening book. But let's look at that a little bit deeper. He caught him in an opening trap, and
then he got crushed by him 2 weeks later.
Well, now this is what I was going to get to is, a player of that level of Szuveges's level who perhaps might play the English opening for argument's sake against him or something and just sit on the position. Would he get that same result there? I kind of think not. Mm. And then bearing in mind that this kid is a good player. I don't want to take anything. Definitely. I don't want to take anything away from this kid. He is a good player, but he definitely has a weakness in that respect. Mm. And I suppose he needs to address that weakness and learn that. And then look, if he's going to become, I don't know how good he's going to get, but if he's going to go on to become an IM, he will at some point address those general issues. But I suppose the difference is nowadays kids are kind of getting probably to a higher level before they start looking at general chess strategy. Whereas in the past they probably learnt the strategy as they learnt the calculation. Now they're kind of learning all the calculation very quickly and then turning to the strategy. Even David Smurden, Grandmaster from Australia, even he was a little bit like that, and he admitted it himself. He's still, even at maybe, I think he was about 21, 2200, he even wrote an article and he said, "I'm still learning to be a positional player." It's sort of strange, he's a very good positional player now, of course, but it's interesting that that side of it's being learnt later and later rather than earlier, and I almost think it's kind of the wrong way around in some ways. Of course, you have to be good at both. You don't get anywhere without being a good calculator, but I suppose calculation should be part of your work rate. Positional stuff can be learnt.
Mm. Okay, so question from my experience coaching, I guess. I started coaching a couple of months ago, and I have these little 7 or 8 year old girls, and they come in and I was amazed at the general principles that they could recite, they know about not blocking in your bishops, controlling the centre, developing knights before bishops, castling early, whatever. And they can repeat those things. But when they play games, they blitz out the moves and bash down the clock, and they don't seem to put any of them into actual principle, into actual practice. Like, they can't stop and think and actually do it. How do you get a kid to slow down and be patient, you know?
Look, I've got 2.5-year-old twins, so yeah, I can relate to that in other areas of life away from chess. I suppose kids are excitable. Yeah, not everyone has the right temperament for chess, but I suppose you just have to drum it into them with a repetitive type style. I guess when you're coaching someone and they block a bishop in, for example, what do we know about blocking our bishops in? Do we do it? No, we don't. Well, why have you done it there? You've blocked your bishop in, or what do we develop first? Knight. So you sort of try to put the question back on them. At some point, I think the penny drops and they start doing it. I think really the work rate is the biggest thing in chess. You've got to sort of drum into them that about work rate. And this is something I think a lot of people have trouble with, both adults and children. A lot of people tend to think that by coming to a chess coach, that you go get an hour's coaching or 2 hours coaching a week or whatever, and somehow just by osmosis the strength exudes from the coach to the student, and it's just a load of rubbish. I mean, the coach will not make you better at chess. The coach teaches you how to make yourself better at chess, and the way you make yourself better at chess is by working hard. You know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. You can teach someone how to calculate. If they don't want to calculate, they won't calculate. And it doesn't matter how many times you tell them, or how many times, even positional themes, how many times you tell them not block their bishops in. They have to want to learn it. Like, there's one of my favourite jokes. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb?
How many?
One. But the light bulb has to really want to change, and it's the same with chess players and coaching. Some do really well, but some you bang your head against the wall because I think at the end of the day they don't want it enough.
Right. Okay. So at the MCC we've got a couple of junior classes starting this year. One on Saturday mornings with Nick Speck, and one on Sunday at midday with I am James Morris. Tell us a little bit about Nick and James. And
okay, well, I know both of them quite well. Nick's, of course, run his junior club for quite a while. It's not just starting this year. But, yeah, look, Nick, to my mind, Nick is, I would say, the equal best coach in Australia, probably, along with Daryl Johansson. Although I've heard very, very good things about Norm Kagan. Also, I haven't been coached by Norm, so I can't really speak. But Nick Speck is an absolutely brilliant coach. He's someone who's so thorough. His understanding of chess is amazing. Again, he's someone who's put in the work to study the classics. But not only does he have a very good understanding of chess and its history and a very good what I call chess culture, he's also kept up to date with the modern game. So he understands what's going on on the world stage at the moment. He understands what the latest theory in, say, King's Indian position is, as well as understanding the previous 150 years worth of what we know as chess. He's got a very good understanding. But what I like about his coaching is he's able to demonstrate that and put that into practice. Sometimes you get very, very good players who are just hopeless as coaches. And it's not because they're not good at chess, because they very much are good at chess, but they just don't understand probably how hard it is for weaker players, or how hard it is for players with perhaps less talent than them, or just how hard chess is in general. Something comes easily to them. It doesn't always come easily to a student, to most people. I know a guy who's a 1600 player and I've known him for 20 years and he still does not understand the minority attack. He just doesn't get it. I've tried explaining it to him probably 10 plus times. He
Who
just
is it?
doesn't matter who it is. What happens with a minority attack stays with a minority attack. He just doesn't understand it, and it's just something he can't get his head around. And I suppose it's very hard as a coach who understands that, and particularly someone like me who so many of my games are played with a minority attack. It's hard for me to understand that someone like that does not understand it. But with someone like Nick, I think he has a very good understanding of what his students understand and what they don't, and how to actually put it into a way that it makes sense to them. I mean, when you're coaching anything, not just chess, you've got to be able to explain how something works. We're trying to demonstrate why this works. How do you make sense of this? How does this happen? And I think Nick's very good at that. And the other thing too is I think Nick I think he understands kids very well too. He's very good with kids. He doesn't actually have kids of his own, but I think if he did, he'd be a very, very good parent. He understands kids well. He understands how they think. He knows what motivates them. He knows that they like trophies, for example. They like winning. They like achieving. And he's very good like that. He's also very thorough. He makes sure that whenever he organises something, he follows through with it. He's not slack. He makes sure he follows through with everything he does. He's very thorough. He's almost pedantic in a way, which is, I say that in a good way. He's very thorough with what he does, and you see his coaching business. That's a shining example of that sort of thing. He's coaching his students win everything basically. And look, I've actually had Nick coach me before I gained my FM title at the Zonal in 99. Was it 99? No, it was 2000. When was it? 2000. I can't even remember when I got my own title. Basically, before that tournament, I had a few issues with a few openings which I thought I was a little bit dodgy in, and I specifically said to Nick, can you give me some coaching on these specific openings? Now, they weren't even openings Nick played, yet he was able to give me a very, very good rundown on these openings, to the point now where I think I play them well. They're probably stronger points in my repertoire, so he's such a well-prepared player. Now, and another thing I think people don't really even, I don't think people give him enough credit, because this was in the age before computers. This was in the era before everyone was using a database. Some people were using them, but...
Sorry, we got cut off there because the camera and the record's half an hour.
Where did I get to?
You got to Nick Speck becoming well-rounded in theory before computer databases existed.
Yeah, he really just knew, he really knew so much for so long. I mean, I heard a story, I'm not really sure if this is 100% true, or I suspect it is. In fact, I'm pretty sure it is. He was generally an E4 player, yet he had a whole D4 repertoire, just in case he would play D4 in one game. It sort of sounds funny, but this is how thoroughly the guy prepares. Like, I'm sure he wouldn't mind me saying that, but he prepares more thoroughly than anyone I know, and with all credit to him, he's become a very good player because of it. But I think he's also a very intelligent man. He's very good at a number of other things, not just chess. So I think he's well-rounded too.
And what about James? Actually, one of your friends, Mr. David Beaumont, described James as the player with the most natural talent that he's ever seen. Yeah,
actually, I was discussing that with Dave once, actually. I 100% agree. I can't ever think that I've met a player with more talent than Morris. I simply can't think of anyone who even is close. He is able to see things in chess that is just, and so quickly too, that
it's amazing.
That other players, who even strong players, just can't quite see. The other thing too is he seems to be able to just be good at chess. He plays I'll tell you a bit about him. When I first met him, he was young. He was maybe 10 years old or whatever. He's playing in a tournament and a little kid who get angry when he blundered and lost and cry. But the thing I know, so his attitude was very good. I loved that about him, that he hated losing. That absolute will to win was really evident. And you should hate losing. The other thing that I noticed about him very early was he plays chess properly. He never shirks an issue in chess. Like, you get a lot of chess players who try to only play chess in the positions they understand. For example, they try to steer every position into their favourite opening or their favourite style of position. So, for example, you get players who like to play a closed position and they'll try to close the position at all costs, or players who like an open position, they'll open it at all costs. And I call that shirking the issue of chess. It's not playing chess on its merits. To be a good player, you have to be well-rounded. You have to play a position on its merits. So, for example, if there's an isolated pawn, you can't decide sometimes, if you're the player who likes to play against an isolated pawn, you're doing yourself a disservice if there's a good isolated pawn to be had. Or if you're the player who likes to use an isolated pawn, you're doing yourself a disservice if the isolated pawn's weak. A player like Morris will play a position with an isolated pawn just as well as he'll play one against an isolated pawn. He's very universal, very practical. He plays a position on its merits. He will not step aside for a position. He'll play it right down the way it's supposed to be played, head first. He will take responsibility for his chess. He'll calculate as much as needs to be calculated and more. He'll work his way through the variations. It's just pure hard calculation. Real blue-collar chess, really hard working chess. He doesn't try to palm anything off. I suppose a sporting equivalent of that is, if we use footy, he'd be a player who just smashes through a pack, knowing it's the right thing to do. Wouldn't just wait for a ball to come out. Or a cricket player, a batsman, maybe an even better example. Someone who plays all the shots, rather than someone who just tries to play one shot in their repertoire. A very universal player who absolutely will go straight down the middle for something. That's the sort of player who, he's not scared of anything in chess. He's not scared of an isolated pawn. He's not scared of not having one. He's not scared of an open position, a closed position. Happy to play an endgame. Happy to keep pieces on the board, on the other hand. Who is he as a player? To my mind, he's a positional player, first and foremost. But he is also a very, very, very strong calculator, very strong tactician. Rather than being a tactician first and foremost, who's also very good strategically. I think his natural game, he's a strategical player, but he's very, very good at all of it, universally.
Yeah, I think by now we've all seen him do both calculate variations with amazing speed and play really simple looking positional games as well. But what about, so he's quite a social person as well. What about his personality for coaching kids?
Oh, look, as a coach, he's an unknown quantity. I don't know, I've never seen him coach anyone. But look, I think he'd be good at it. I think he would be good at it. He's very, very good at the game, very talented. And as long as he's able to recognise that it doesn't come as easily to other people as it does to him, he'll be fine. I mean, he's a very good player. He understands general principles very well. He also seems to have a very good chess culture, a very good understanding of the history of chess, I think, as well. Probably not as much as Spec, but then he's younger than Spec. So I think he understands that sort of thing quite well, and I think that'll help him. But yeah, he is a very sociable person, and again, a very talented person. I think a lot of people don't realise he's a very, very good pianist. He gave up music to concentrate on chess, but he's very, very good at it. But he's also the sort of person, he's someone who can fit in anywhere. So, you get your sort of classic awkward chess player, you take them to a pub or you take them to a party, and they kind of don't really talk to anyone. Morris is the sort of person, you take him to a pub or a party and he's talking to everyone. You wouldn't know he was a chess player as such. He's someone who can fit in anywhere. You take him to, I suppose, a working class environment or an upper class environment. He'd fit in both. You know, he'll fit in a blue collar job, a white collar job. He'll fit in with Australians, but also with people from overseas. He's someone who can go anywhere, talk to anyone, and you know, and always, I suppose, come out popular. That's just the sort of person he is. And someone like that, as a good communicator, they should generally be a good chess coach.
Definitely.
Generally.
Okay, a couple more questions. Back to improving at chess for kids. So when I started, I was about... Well, I mean, I started when I was very young, but when I got back into chess, I memorised a lot of opening lines. Mainly with openings that I don't play anymore. But I do remember them, and I think it had some beneficial effect. But tell us what you think about that idea. Is that a good way to start learning chess or not?
Look, I think at some point you have to do it, but I don't think it's a good way to start learning chess. You need to do it at some stage, but I think the general thing is you need to get the general principles down pat first, because, like I said earlier, you need to know how to play against bad moves as well. So if you learn, say, 15, 20 moves of some variation in the Roy Lopez, and then someone plays an offbeat, unorthodox move, you're sort of going to know what to do against that. So I think the first thing you should be learning as a beginner is general principles. So develop your pieces, control the centre, knights before bishops, and then you sort of get up to the next level of that, which is basic calculation and things like a knight outpost, good and bad bishops, things like that. And then when you've sort of got to that level where you're kind of sort of roughly competitive in a kind of coffeehouse manner, I suppose, then that's when you need to start looking at opening theory. Yeah, I think though with openings, the way people study openings is appalling. Too many people just learn lines, whereas I think what's more important is to actually learn about the structure of an opening. Which ones are the best pieces in that opening? I'll give you an example. A lot of people play the King's Indian as black, and they always they value the dark squared bishop because it's the King's Indian bishop, yet it's actually a bad piece. It's stuck behind its pawns. Whereas the best piece in the King's Indian, of the minor pieces, is the light squared bishop, because that's the one that'll basically decisively smash through with the attack. And because the pawns are on dark, it's on light, it's a better piece. Now, that's something which you're not going to learn that by studying lines like 20 moves of the Samish or 20 moves of the Averbach or the Petrosian or whatever. You're going to learn that just by playing the King's Indian and understanding that is the best piece there, the best minor piece. Don't swap it off, for example. I think that sort of thing, understanding the ideas behind an opening, and not just the ideas, but also the middle games you'll get from an opening, and even the end games you'll get from it. So, for example, if you're playing the Karakana's black, understanding with the Panov attack, Karakana tends to be a better endgame for black anyway, but especially if in the Panov, get to the endgame, that isolated pawn's going to be weak for white. So, but, understanding the ideas is more important than understanding exact moves, 20 moves deep. When you get to 1800, yes, definitely learn the theory. Definitely start learning 20, 25 moves. Before that, understand the ideas. It's a lot more important.
Okay, last question. So people say, I guess, there's 5 or 6 parts to chess. Opening, middle game, end game, tactics, strategy, planning, whatever you want to call it. I'd just like to go over each of them, and maybe if you can give juniors a tip for how to improve in that part of the game, or something that you did that you found helpful. So the first one is combinations, tactics.
Okay. I want to just state here, and this is a big problem, I think. A lot of people confuse tactics and calculation. Tactics is things like pins, forks, double attacks, skewers, discovered attacks, discovered checks, seesaw checks, windmills, that sort of stuff. That's tactics. Calculation is a totally different animal altogether. Calculation is, I play this, he plays that, I play this, then if he plays that, I play this. If he does that, I'll have to do this. But what happens after that? It's very mathematical, it's very boring. It's basically working down a line. It's absolute discipline. It's a hard thing to do. It's discipline. You have to get it exact. You have to get it right every time. This is what the hard work at the board is about. Working hard at the board, calculation. This is hard blue-collar chess. This is what calculation is. The only way to improve your calculation is to calculate. You just have to do it. If you want a training method, best thing to do, look at a chess book, not a database, a book. Open up any book, I don't know, Kasparov's Best Games or whatever. Pick a diagram in the book and start reading through the variations without a chessboard. Look at them, try to analyse them in your head, try to keep disciplined about it. It doesn't matter if you get them all right. That's because it's your training. You just have to keep working hard at the board, keep working. Calculation is not so much about learning how to calculate. Any idiot can calculate. It's a matter of whether they can calculate 2 moves ahead or 20. It's just more about getting in the habit of doing it, training yourself to have a work rate where you can actually calculate down a line 20 moves deep without your head exploding.
Okay, so what about tactics? People say things like you should find a tactics book and repeat it 3 or 4 or 5 times. Do you agree with that?
What's a tactics book?
Well, a book full of diagrams with problems and tactics that you need to solve.
It's a load of junk. I mean, in all honesty, you see a situation where there's a puzzle where it says white to mate in 5 and there's 3 queens on the board and 6 knights and just a position you're never going to get in a game, and even if you did get in a game you'd swap everything off and win anyway. I think that's just the biggest waste of time anyone can do with their chess. I mean,
so how do you practice your tactics?
Well, I think it's practicing calculation. You get better. Tactics is something you can't force tactics on a position. But a tactic appears in a position.
Right.
You work on your calculation.
I would disagree with that though, because if you don't know the pattern for something.
Oh, looking at a pattern. How to use a pin properly? Is that what you mean, or
how to
use a fork?
How to use a fork? How to use a discovered attack? How to use a pin. For example, if the F6 knight is pinned.
Well, I guess you've got the strategical side of it. So when you've got the pin, gang up on the pin piece, for example.
Yep.
And then you've got the fork. Try to use the fork to fork something and tie it up so it's not doing something else. Using a pin and fork together, pin something to tie it up and then fork with another. It's sort of like using 2 weapons at once.
Okay, how do you practice that though?
There's a lot of ways. You're just playing Blitz is one way. Practicing your calculation, getting complicated positions in Blitz and working through the complications. Analysing. Analysing is great. Going to the club and some 2 random people have played a game and just standing there analysing it with them. Going through the game and someone suggests something and Ali Barangia will suggest, what about this move? And going through a long complicated line. And that's how you improve that sort of stuff. If you're at home on the computer, I think there's a program, I don't recall what it's called. I think it's something like Chess Tactics Server. And basically there's a tactic in the position and you have to find it. But what I like about that is they're all realistic positions.
From real games.
Yeah, they're from real games and they're positions you're likely to get. You know, it might be some position from a Catalan or whatever. And, you know, it's a position you're likely to get in chess. It's not a silly position with 4 queens and 2 bishops of the same colour and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's how to improve your tactics. But to my mind, you improve your calculation first. The tactics will come. That's just by playing. You'll understand tactical themes as they arise, you know. But they're not that easy to study as such.
Yep.
Get better at everything in chess and tactics get better, I think.
Right, and I agree with you about playing Blitz. I think I improved a lot just by playing thousands of games, maybe with you as well. And I would make a move and you'd sigh and gasp and you'd say, oh, that was a horrible positional mistake. And after you do it 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 times, playing Blitz sort of drums that into you a bit.
Yeah, totally agree. I know this might sound very pretentious of me, but the people who don't play Blitz, I almost don't consider them real chess players in a funny way. I mean, I don't say that. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but
Just trying to make new friends.
I find people who don't play Blitz, there's something a little bit, there's something missing in their chess. I think they don't. Obviously you can get a 2300 player who doesn't play Blitz. But I mean, imagine how good that guy would have got if he did play Blitz. And they say Botvinnik hated Blitz. He was a world champion. I'm not going to criticise him, but imagine how good he would have been if he played Blitz. I just think it adds another dimension to chess that adds skills. It adds that scrappy sort of street fighting type element to your game, that practical play, like that Chris Kollak type or Michael Barron type element. One thing with chess, with Blitz, you learn to defend really well. Like a good Blitz player just knows how to defend bad positions, because you get bad positions in Blitz, or you get games where people attack you in Blitz. You have to know how to defend, and when you can do it in Blitz, when you get to a tournament game, when you've got a long game where you've got all the pressure there, and someone's attacking you and you have to defend, you have to find 4 or 5 exact moves in a row to keep you in the game. Because you've made yourself battle hardy in Blitz, it's a lot easier to find them. And that's why I think Blitz is important. I mean, when I was young, I played a lot of Blitz with 2 players. Ali Barangier was one, and Chris Kollak was another. Now, neither of them were world beaters, it's fair to say. But the fact is, I played so much Blitz with them, and every game they would throw absolutely everything toward my king. You can't help but to get better at the defensive side of your game just through playing people like that, because you're always defending. You get better at defence by doing it. And there's other players, of course, you get better at attacking by attacking them all the time. But I think the attacking stuff is... Excuse me. So you can put that into the bloopers here.
Alright, so we'll move on from that one. We got the general gist of it.
Yeah,
Blitz is good. So the next one's probably the hardest thing, I think, for kids to learn. Planning, strategy, the middle game. Any recommendations for how kids can do it?
Gosh, it's such a big area. I suppose knowing the plans behind the openings you play, understanding the plans is important. But
so they should study the plans of specific openings rather than trying to
play. Definitely.
Yeah. Rather than trying to understand strategy as a whole or something.
Well, no, they need to know strategy as a whole. I mean, you need to. It doesn't matter how well you know some opening if you don't know the difference between a good bishop and a bad bishop. Where are you going to go with that? You need to know what's a good piece, what's a bad piece. You need to know about outposts, pawn structure. The amount of people who make pawn weaknesses for no apparent reason, it baffles me. And it's like this cancer has increased these days. People are playing, average players are playing worse with their pawn structure than they ever have. Back in the day, you used to have to try to induce a pawn weakness. These days, they'll just make one for you anyway. People need to get better at that. Learn how to use pawns. Learn about pawn structure. Learn about good and bad pieces, where pieces naturally go. This is all strategy. Study the games from the Grandmasters from the 40s to the 70s. Botvinnik, Petrosian, Tal, Smyslov, Portish, Fischer. Fischer, very important positional player. Blah, blah. Karpov, another one. These sorts of players, learn strategy that way. But don't neglect your calculation. Very important. The 2 elements of chess, strategy and calculation. Don't neglect either. They're both so important.
What about the endgame?
Endgames you get better at by playing them. It's as simple as that. You can learn about endgames. A very good book by Szuveges called Endgame Strategy. Everyone should read that book. And on the middle game, everyone should read the book of the Zurich 1953 tournament, written by David Bronstein. That is the best strategy book ever written about chess. Everyone should read that book, every game in it.
Okay.
And Endgame, Szuveges Endgame Strategy. Now, with endgames, read that book, but play them. Just play endgames. Practice them. Because there's some things you can learn by memorising, but endgames aren't one of them. Endgames is something you learn by doing. And it's like driving a car. Most of the when you learn to drive, you do however many hours, and you learn. You sit the test, and you get the license. But you learn more about driving after you've got the license and you're out on the road in the hurly-burly of real traffic and stuff. The same with end games. You'll learn them from playing them.
Alright, and last one, I think you'll enjoy this one. So, when kids start to play adult tournaments, and they start coming up against adults who might not be, you know, as gentle or nice or sporting maybe, not that we're saying that, you know, that will happen, but it may happen.
Yeah.
What do they need to do to have that sort of competitive readiness to compete with adults?
Well, they've got to toughen up. I mean, I don't know, what should I... That was the first instinct, toughen up. But, no, I mean, you'll often get a situation where you've got adults who they may not be as good as the kids at chess, but they're more battle hardy, they've got more match fitness. They've just been around the block more times, they know more tricks, they just have more experience. I mean, the best way is for a kid is just throw themselves into it. You know, it's the same in another sport. Like, you'll often get in, again, I love footy, so we'll use footy as an example. You know, the 18-year-old or 17-year-old plays their first AFL game. They're going to get bashed from pillar to post. Every single debutant does, and it's part of it. You learn to cop it. You learn to how hard it is, and it's probably, you've played soccer. It's probably the same in soccer. Everyone targets the new player. They target the young guys. But part of being a good player is to work through it. You know you're going to get targeted. You have to just let your game do the talking, and it's the same in chess. Let your moves do the talking. People are going to try to beat you. That's part of it. What, do you think they don't want to beat you? Of course they want to beat you. No one wants to lose to the new kid. You just have to kind of not take... One thing about chess, to not take it personally. You know, people do nasty things in chess. You know, people eat apples while it's your move and crunch on them and try to irritate you. They get up from the board, they walk in your line of vision, they stand over the board blocking the light. They do these nasty sorts of things, but at the end of the day, the stronger you get, the more they're going to keep doing it. So you sort of got to learn to deal with it fairly early, and you just let your chess do the talking. You know, everyone knows that there's certain players who just don't get intimidated. You know, you just let your chess do the talking, try to play good moves. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much someone carries on. They carry on like a pork chop all game. If you're playing good moves, there's no substitute for good moves. And just try to play good moves, work hard at the board, calculate. Sit there and work as hard as you've ever worked, and work even harder. And then if you're not exhausted after every game you play, you haven't worked hard enough. Either that or if you've won too easily. But, well, that's a nice problem to have, but work harder and exhaust yourself calculating. That is the way to do it. And pretty soon you kind of get a bit adjusted to how the whole chess scene is and all the crazies in it and all that sort of thing. And, you know, you start to love it, you know, it's enjoyable, and then you just become one of them, I suppose, and you know, and eventually you'll be there as a player playing against the next young up-and-comer, and you're going to want to beat them too, and it's almost a rite of passage, it's an initiation, and, you know, and that's part of it. What I will say, I don't want people to think that I'm condoning, I suppose, cheating or unsportsmanlike behaviour. You know, there's sort of a level there. You know, you don't cheat, I don't like the idea of trying to intimidate people as such. You know, people do it though, and, you know, and it does happen from time to time, but, you know, of course, be competitive, you know, try to win. It's part of it, it's fun, it's the whole aggressive side of chess. I love it. You know, it's more, I suppose I love it in Blitz even more. In Blitz it's even better because there's sort of no rules with it. You can talk the whole game to your opponent. That's even more fun. But, you know, I've had people play games against me, you know, where they'll talk to me during the game and just say funny stuff to try to distract me and make me laugh. And, you know, it's all fun. It's a bit of fun. If your moves are good enough, it doesn't matter what anyone does.
I can agree with that. Okay, and well, thanks for that, FIDE Master Grant Szuveges, and we hope to see you down at the club for some of the exciting stuff we've got on with the master lectures on Sunday and the junior classes on Saturday and Sunday next year.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this year actually.
This year.
It's now 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, see ya.